What's up, guys? My name is Andy, and this is my podcast. So I thought we would title today Candace Owens and Prostitute Pastors. Candace Owens and Prostitute Pastors. So I thought it'd be good to talk about Candace Owens again, just because people are losing their ever-loving minds over Candace Owens, and it's just relevant regarding culture and Christian worldview and those types of things. Originally, I thought, man, I don't want to do another podcast on this, but it's still being talked about, still highly relevant, and the way at which people are attacking her is different. It's something I haven't seen in my lifetime. It's like a scarlet letter type thing. They're denouncing her, but doing so in the strongest biblical language possible, which is it appears to be such a magnificent, gross overreaction that I think it's actually not hurting her, but it's hurting those making the denunciations. Excuse me. So I thought it'd be good to go over again. But before I want to look at a recent blog post by Doug Wilson. I guess it's not super recent. It was December 22nd that it was actually put out there, but I'm just now getting around to looking at it and critiquing it. And but before we briefly look at that, I want to read over some of it and then just give some thoughts as I'm reading it. But before I do that, we need some preliminary thoughts to help lay the foundation for some of the critique, so that I don't have to do that all the way through as I'm reading it. So just some necessary background to critique that blog post by Doug Wilson. For those of you that don't know, he's a pastor out in Moscow, Idaho. He's come to really kind of broken into the mainstream the last few years. He was always kind of a guy that was always kind of excluded from the cool kids table in broader Reformed evangelical circles. I think that was wrong. I think that was. Okay. Full disclosure, I hate gatekeepers. I hate it. I hate all of it. I hate the cattiness and the cliques and the tribes, and I hate all of that. I hate the triteness. I hate all of it. So he was a guy that was excluded from that, and unfortunately so, because historically he's had a lot of good things to say. But I think I did a podcast a couple of years ago where I asked the question, when you've spent your whole life excluded from the cool kids table, what happens when you become your own cool kids table? Well, I think we're seeing the fruit of that now, and it's troubling, just as troubling as it was when those guys were doing it, but for different reasons, I guess, just different tribe, right? But so in response to his blog, that was, let me see, I have it here. I had to print it up so I could read some of it. It's entitled Israel, Me, Team Candace, and the Turning Point Aftermath. And I believe it was December 22nd. I believe that was the one, but not entirely sure on the date, but that's definitely the title of the blog. I listened to it and then I printed it up because I wanted to highlight it, but my initial response to it was disgusted. And as I've read through it, and it was just hit record on this, and I was just looking at it again. I'm even more disgusted. I think he's actually guilty of all of the things he's accusing Candace of. So that's why it's kind of necessary to do the preliminary thoughts, or to lay a little bit of groundwork, kind of leading up to the post. I think to discredit some of the things that not only Wilson has said, but a lot of other people have said too, regarding Candace Owens. I think Candace has become a representative. I think she's a boogeyman. If you attack her, then you attack everything that's associated with her type thing. So it's easy to just lift her up and then shoot her down type thing, because then you discredit everything that she's saying or anybody that's listening to her or whatever. I think there's a lot of that going on. So prior to the murder of Charlie Kirk, because the murder of Charlie Kirk, there's just a bunch of stuff surrounding that. It's all kind of in that orbit as far as the blog, Wilson's blog, and then the TPUSA stuff. all of the things that he says are kind of built around that orbit, that one major event. So prior to Charlie Kirk's the murder of Charlie Kirk, it's important for us to remember that there was essentially zero confidence in the government, and there was already a division in division and a growing division within conservatism, right? Because it wasn't that much. It wasn't in July when Charlie Kirk he had the TPUSA event where he had Dave Smith and Tucker out, and that was the big. There was all the brouhaha about that in Israel and Epstein. That was Trump had. It was just after Trump had said Epstein who, right? That was that event, and people were ticked, and it kind of resonated in that event and so on. So all that to say, there was a lot of division already occurring, and there were a lot of things that led up to that, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But regarding our intelligence agencies, really zero confidence, and I don't think there's, and that was going into the election, and then after the election, that was really so much of the energy was that this is going to finally get cleaned up. And I don't think there's really any disagreement. I mean, as I say that, I don't think anybody listening to this, primarily you probably lean hard right if you're listening to this. Okay, cool. But if you don't, you're listening to this, I can't imagine there'd be any disagreement to want to say that in saying that our intelligence agencies are corrupt, and we should all desire to root that out, left or right. I don't care. I hate the corruption. I hate the deception. I hate all of it. It's just gross. So I don't think there's any disagreement there. And I think we have a good reason for suspicion. I think we have a good reason for questioning our intelligence agencies because they've lied to us repeatedly. They lied to us about JFK, RFK, MLK, about the Vietnam War, about Watergate, about all of the MK Ultra stuff. They lied to us about Iran-Contra, the Oklahoma City bombing, Waco, the Las Vegas shooting, COVID, 2020, January 6th, Epstein, all the Epstein stuff, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And those are just the things that I can think of off the top of my head, right? It's that bad. It is that bad. Regardless of what you think actually happened regarding any of the things that I just said, we've been lied to about all of those things. Categorically, unequivocally, provably lied to about all of those things. So you have a great multitude of reasons for distrust and suspicion. There is good reason to distrust our government. There is good reason to have suspicion regarding anything that they tell you. I mean, the moral of the story is, regarding any of the things that I just mentioned, is don't ever believe the first thing they tell you, because principally, repeatedly, they have lied through their teeth. Oh yeah, the assassination of Trump. I mean, or the attempted assassination of Trump at Butler, and the killer, and or the attempted killer, the guy they killed. Sorry, just I have these things flooding my mind as I'm talking. Moral of the story: a whole bunch of stuff, all the stuff they've lied about, right? So, all that to say, I think it is more than reasonable to be suspicious when they tell you something. Also, when your eyes see the exact opposite of what they are telling you, it is wise and prudent and reasonable to be suspicious, if nothing else. And when someone says you can't be suspicious, you can't ask any more questions, all that does is feed the suspicion and make the person that's saying those things look like an absolute hack and a fool. So it should be apparent that those people that are serving, those who rule over us and are involved in civil leadership and civil governance, and in all of our non-elected intelligence officials, they're not there to serve you. They are there to serve themselves. That is a big, big problem, because they've been given the sword to execute justice, right? I have a big problem when deception becomes the modus operandi of those who have the power to kill you legally. not good, right? So I think if that is the biggest problem, right? Our government should always be under a spotlight, and I'm much more concerned about our own government than I am about foreign governments. I'm much more concerned about our own government than the evil lefties or the evil trannies or the evil whatever, and all of the evil hacks on the right. I'm more concerned about our government always than I am about any of those groups or about my neighbor or anybody else. I'm concerned about them. Why? Because they have the sword, and I should be very concerned. And they've given me every reason to be overwhelmingly suspicious. Okay. So there's that component of it regarding distrust in the authorities and particularly the intelligence agencies and so on. Also, regarding the division within conservatism. First, I would say in some respects, some division was bound to happen. Some of it was bound to happen after you're looking at this thing. Oh, we have such a broad tent, everyone kept saying, and how cool it was. Well, no, not necessarily. Diversity isn't what binds people together. When you have the globalists and the isolationists under one tent, when you have gay Dave Rubin and his gay lover purchasing babies under the same tent as Christian nationalists, when you have abortionists and abolitionists, when you have Israel sycophants and American first people all under the same tent, guess what's going to happen? Eventually, eventually that thing's going to blow up. That thing is a powder keg, right? Eventually, you are going to have some division. At some point, that honeymoon is going to be over. So you're going to experience some of that no matter what. The interesting thing here is, though, I think the division that we are experiencing now, I mean, you could mention some of those groups, namely the Israel sycophants and the American first people, or the globalists and the isolationists, particularly just regarding some of the things that we're currently dealing with. But it's not because those guys are have drawn first blood and gone at each other. They're going at each other because of decisions that Trump has repeatedly made. So I think all of the division within the conservative party right now, all of it goes back to Trump. It all lands on his desk because of things that he's done and things that he has said. It's very shortly after he was elected, you had the Iran bombing, right? The no nuclear weapons type thing, and we did the bombing of the nuclear sites. Now that created instant division because primarily, by and large, people did not want, at least unless you're like part of the neocons. Nobody wanted any more wars. They're so sick of the bloodshed and the money spent and the focus internationally and continually doing these things for reasons that are not advantageous to our own people. So that happened right away, and people were like, "What the hell is this? What is going on?" I didn't sign up for this, right? But it was very early on. He had a ton of political momentum, which I think, just as an aside, I think this is gonna be one of the biggest crash and burns in history if he keeps going the way that he's going. I'm done. I don't know what other conclusions people are gonna come to, but I'm personally done. And I'll tell you why in a sec. I mean, it's not been a secret if you've been listening to any of my podcasts where I'm at regarding Trump and anyone in his orbit. The sad thing is he had a lot of good people connected to him, and I think he's defiled them all as a result of decisions that he's made, which really, really sucks. But he had the Iran bombing, and then our relationship specifically with Israel was connected to that, and then that discussion became front and center and didn't go away because it was connected to, loosely connected, not solely, but certainly connected to Epstein as well. It's not to say there aren't other intelligence agencies connected to Epstein, our own specifically, but certainly connected to that. And people are absolutely horrified and disgusted by that. So what people wanted more of than anything else after he was elected was this rooting out of corruption, right? And just truth be told, that was the one thing that I was most excited about. I thought, if nothing else, if you can expose and then uproot evil, good. And then you had the whole Epstein thing, and the Epstein thing is disgusting. It's horrible. I hate it. With a deep and violent hatred. I hate it. And the Epstein thing, I'm so glad that it has not lost traction. If anything gives me hope, it's that people are still pissed about that and still pushing that. And the Epstein thing is a representative type thing, I think. I mean, the guy was horrifying and disgusting for a great multitude of reasons, but he was also representative of corruption and sexual perversion and the deep state, because he was connected to so many people. And that's what people want, that stuff brought to the light. They want the lights turned on. They want to uproot this stuff. They're just sick of it. And praise God for that. That's a good thing, that they want that stuff exposed and punished. And I'm right there with them, left or right. I don't care. Let all their heads roll, right? Let justice reign. And then January 8th happened. He had that cabinet meeting, speaking of Trump, and he did the whole Epstein who line. Are you guys still talking about Epstein? And he called it a Democratic hoax. You think, okay, maybe he's just giving the benefit of the doubt. What the heck is he doing? This is completely uncharacteristic of him. Normally he's pretty good at reading the room, but this is nuts. And then he called it a Democratic hoax. He said his followers were stupid for believing it, and that he didn't need their support. I'm saying this because this was not a glitch in the system. This was the system. He went off repeatedly about this. Trump did. And it said there are no files. Remember, the Justice Department sent the letter to the FBI, case closed type thing. At that point, that was the first podcast I did back, was on Epstein. And I said, I'm done. I'm done with all of this. I don't want any part in any of it. I'm not voting for the lesser of two evils. And if it's supporting elite pedophile rings and the raping of American girls, right? I'm just done. That's if there's anything that should cause the American people to rise up and say, enough. If you guys don't punish this, we're going to punish you violently. That should be it. So at that point, I said, I'm done. I don't think he recovers from this. I hope he doesn't recover from this, but I would never support anybody that's connected to him because of this. I won't. I'm done with it. So fast forward, we know some of the developments. Last I heard, they found, right? They just so happened to find 2 million more. I think was the last number I heard 2 million more. So on top of the over 50,000 documents they've already released on that, and that was after, I forget how many other thousands of documents released. They just happened to find 2 million more. And that's what they've found on top of all of the other stuff that was deleted. Now, just to put that into perspective, I mean, I have in my basement, wall-to-wall bookshelves, so books all around. I like books. I purge every once in a while because I get too many, and then I think I have a problem, and then I purge, and then I do it all over again. So this is kind of a confession, but all that to say, I have a lot of books. I don't know if I have that many pages in print in the entirety of my library. I don't even know what 2 million pages looks like. They found 2 million more on top of everything that they've already released, aside from all of the other stuff they deleted. So remember, Trump said, no files, you're an idiot, it's a Dem hoax. Oh yeah, here's over a couple million documents that we just happened to come across that. So there's all of that. To say there's that, so you have the distrust in the intelligence agencies. You have Trump not just dropping the ball, but going in the exact opposite direction and leading everybody to believe that he's supporting the elites, right? And so you have that's not just, hey, that's a bad thing. It's a complete gut punch, because It's doing the exact opposite and doing it with the most vile and disgusting of things. So all of the division within conservatism right now, despite all of like those massive groups that I just mentioned just a little bit ago, I think all of it is a result of Trump and decisions that he's made and courses that he's decided to go down. Okay, that's important to keep in mind. All of that is all of that is before Charlie Kirk was murdered or Candace Owens said anything about Charlie Kirk's murder, right? So I just want you to understand that. I'm sure you already do, but as you reflect on these things, right, there's so much information coming at us at all times, and you're supposed to be an enemy of this person, and I'm told I'm supposed to hate this person today, and ooh, this person's a bad guy, and this person's the new boogeyman, and ooh, look at their forehead, there's a scarlet letter, type thing. But all of that was the case before Charlie was murdered, before Candace Owens ever said anything about Charlie's murder. So that to say, Candace Owens did not create any of that division. That was all there, right? That was all there. So then Charlie Kirk is murdered. It affects the entirety of the country. The FBI's handling of it is absolutely abysmal. It would be comical if it wasn't so tragic and so sad. And then the mainstream media's coverage of the murder of Charlie Kirk is they are all uniformly echoing the FBI's narrative. I don't even know what their narrative is at this point. Furry lover, Shakespearean texts, World War I rifle, tranny bad, boogeyman. Ooh, originally he's a tranny who's involved with Antifa. Okay. All right. So they're all echoing that. And then you have, sorry, I could go off on that, but there's that. And then TPUSA uses the murder of Charlie Kirk as a complete and absolute cash grab. I mean, I'm not saying there weren't those there mourning. I'm just simply saying, like, reflectively looking back on it, and currently to this day, it is an absolute cash grab. Like, if you look at it, you should feel icky, if nothing else, because that's what it is. And because of that, it causes suspicion. It looks weird. Normal people wouldn't do that. Just wouldn't do that. If my wife was murdered, I wouldn't use it as a cash grab to raise money and to sell merch and to promote my business. So you have that. You have Erica Kirk's behavior, which is completely weird. I mean, if nothing else, I'm not implying guilt when I say that. I think it's completely reasonable to say her behavior is weird. A normal human being wouldn't act that way under those circumstances, right? You give benefit of the doubt, benefit of the doubt, benefit of the doubt, and then you get to the point to where you go, this is just freaking weird, and there's no other way to explain it. And then every time she opens her mouth, it just gets worse, and it makes people more uncomfortable. And if there wasn't suspicion before, there certainly is now, right? You go, this is just weird. That, coupled with the fact that there's no other investigation outside of what they've said. It's a lone gunman who's a bad guy because he likes trannies and Antifa too. There's that. So, that's it. No one else was involved in any way, shape, or form. There's no other investigation being done. No other questions are being asked. There's a whole lot to say about that, about what's happening there, but I'll just got to move on for the sake of time, for brevity's sake. And then we find out, right, after that, you find out, okay, well, there were a lot of issues with Jewish donors, right? That's not an attack on the Jews. That's just simply to say, right? Because you go back to the Iran bombing and the support of Israel and all of these things in the TPUSA event. You go back to that and what was said there regarding the nation of Israel, not the Jews, nation of Israel and their political policies. But So Charlie was having issues with his Jewish donors. We know for a fact he talked to the prime minister around that time frame. So the prime minister of a foreign country was in communication with him regarding these things. Now, I don't think we can say for certain. There's not transcripts of those phone calls, so you can lead into it whatever you want, read into that whatever you want. The fact of the matter is we know they talked, which, just FYI, that's kind of peculiar, right? If you're the prime minister of a foreign nation having these types of conversations with a conservative think tank nonprofit in our country, okay? When there's all of these issues regarding finances, big finances, and all of these things. So Bibi Netanyahu is in communication with him. We know that for certain. We know that Charlie wanted to enact a Doge, like a financial audit, a strict financial audit to review all of the books because he thought there was some financial funny business going on. That's not a secret, right? I mean, we know that. He was trying to do. Now, you can read into that whatever you want, whatever it is. Before he died, there was something that led him to believe that he needed to get a closer handle on the finances in his company because there was funny stuff going on and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. We know that. We also know that before he died, he sent out a text message saying, "They are going to kill me," which is highly suspicious right before you are murdered. Now, when he said they are going to kill me, he wasn't specifically speaking about bad trannies, right? No, that's not my endorsement of transgenderism at all, but we know for a fact that's not the group he was concerned about when he sent that message out. We also know that people profited from his death. We also know that Erica Kirk's past is pretty shady and her present is pretty weird. And installing her as CEO of this company, right, one of the biggest conservative political nonprofits in our country, just taking her and installing her as the CEO of this company after the murder of her husband seems weird, right? It just seems a little weird, right? In any other investigation, if this is you or this is me or this is anybody else, you're going to look for who had motive, right? Were there business dealings that had gone bad? Were there current disagreements? Were things said in anger? Were finances moved around to position themselves against such an event? Were there financial incentives involved in the death of this person? The answer to all of those questions is absolutely 100%. The right thing to do would be then to investigate those things. And not pointing fingers at Erica Kirk, but given all of the white knights that swoon in like a bunch of, I won't say, but that swoon in to defend Milady's honor, in most of these, like if you have a murder of a spouse like that, like I forget what the exact number is. It's like 13% of the time it's the spouse, right? So to ask the question isn't unheard of. Like if something happened to my wife, I would be questioned and I would cooperate. I would be forthright and I would say anything and everything because I would want their actual murderer to be caught, right? So I before I ever heard any of Candace Owens' podcasts, before I ever heard her say anything, I had my suspicions. So did half of our country because of what they were seeing right in front of their face outside of Candace Owens, right? Before ever listening to her. I think what has happened is she has become a voice of those things. She has become a representative of those, she's become a representative for those who are pointing those things out, going, hey, this is weird. Hey, why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? Why is it only that he, like this one lone gunman had to act and there nothing else possibly could have been involved in any other way, shape, or form. Not only that, but if you're saying that there could be another possible narrative, well, you are you're a lot of things, and we'll get into some of those things. And those things, like the demonizing of that group of people that are suspicious, that are asking questions, of which Candace Owens has now kind of become the representative of, or the voice of. And I think there's reasons for that. It's because if you trash her and attack her and demean her and all the stuff, then it's inadvertently, indirectly destroying anyone else that is asking those same questions too. Cut the head off type thing, right? That's the idea. Not that I don't think it's fair to say she's the head of any of that, because like I just said, people have drawn all of these conclusions outside of Candace Owens. Does this mean that TPUSA is guilty of anything? No, not necessarily, but it certainly means being suspicious is absolutely reasonable. Right? I think when you state it the way that I just did, like, I don't know any of those people, and I don't care about any of those people. What I would want to see happen is that somebody who's actually involved in murder gets prosecuted. That's what I want. So I think it's absolutely reasonable to be suspicious regarding some of these people. And when I'm told that I can't be, it makes me even more suspicious. So then, when I heard that she was going to, Candace, when I heard that she was going to look into the Charlie Kirk murder, I thought, sweet. I don't know. I don't care. Great. That's fantastic. Look into it. I hope you do. I hope you use all of your resources to look into it. Someone needs to. Right? Somebody needs to do it. Obviously, our government isn't doing it, regardless of the gross amount of money that we pay them to do these things and to execute justice. Somebody, and just FYI, the reason any of this is catching on is because they're not doing their job. Okay? We can never forget that point. So, Candace Owens has been, I think, uniformly and personally attacked incessantly as a result. Now, I've watched, because of that, I'm going, okay, what the heck is going on? And I've gone back and I've started watching the episodes when a lot of this stuff people started talking about it. I thought, okay, why? Let's watch it so that I know what she's saying and I know what they're saying. So I've watched a lot of the episodes because I wanted to be able to talk about it credibly. I can honestly say most of the things that people are attacking her on are complete and absolute BS, right? As far as the bringing of receipts, right? That's the latest talking points. No receipts. She's constantly saying, this is why I'm suspicious of this. Here's the receipt. Repeatedly doing it. So I think, and that's just one thing, but that's the thing that comes to the top of my mind, right? So there's this uniform, calculated attempt to cancel her. Whenever you see this uniform, all of the same talking points, calculated attack to cancel someone, they're usually right, or they're right about some things, or they kicked the bear somewhere. In throwing all the darts at the board, some of them stuck, and it made people uncomfortable when they saw that. This usually happens when that happens, right? When there's this uniform, calculated canceling attempt, it's because that person's like I said, become like a representative, and that person has to be ended. In ending that person, you can kind of you end people that are listening to them, type thing. That's the idea. To destroy them is to destroy what they're doing. Now that should be extremely troubling to people like me, because which is, I'm sure, many of you that are listening to this, because you've drawn all of those same conclusions. You've had suspicions. You've asked questions before ever listening to Candace, if you've ever even listened to her, right? I don't know if people listening to this have watched her show. A lot of people have. Her show's doing very, very well. But a lot of people have come to those same conclusions and are like, this is really weird. This makes me feel icky. Hey, why is that the case? Just FYI, why is that the case? So just an example, the whole flight log thing, because people have been mocking her endlessly about the Egyptian flight logs because like she's tracked these Egyptian flights of which there's record of. There are receipts of that. And they had been following like Erica Kirk around, right? She said she thought they were following Charlie. They were following Erica Kirk. And Tucker mentioned it. He said, I actually looked into it. Those planes are legit, right? That they were doing that. So you have other people that have looked into this and have said, look, this whole thing with the Egyptian planes is weird. Now, it may be nothing. It could be something that's completely dismissed. But here's my thinking behind this. If I was on the board of directors of TPUSA, if I was a big investor in TPUSA, they have some big ones, I would want to get to the bottom of that. Why? Because she is the current CEO of the company. Our former CEO, speaking now on behalf of if I was on the board or involved, our former CEO was just publicly executed. And we now know that our current CEO is being tracked or followed by foreign planes. That's a little weird. I want to ensure her safety, not just for her sake and her children's sake, but for the sake of our company, of which I have a moral and fiduciary responsibility to protect. So I would think that if you were working or involved in that company at all, you would come forward and you would say, thank you, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Her safety is our greatest concern. Not only do you not get that, and not only do you not get crickets, you get mockery, stone cold mockery. Now, like I said, maybe there's an explanation for it. I don't know, but you would think that you would want to get to the bottom of that and for your donor's sake to say, look, we got this under control. We're going to make sure that nothing happens to our current CEO, right? So that's just one of those things. And that to me seems completely reasonable because that's what would happen in the real world. That's what would happen if you were operating in the real world where everything is not political theater. Those would be reasonable conclusions to come to. So the underlining premise in the investigation, with the suspicion, with the questions that many of us are asking, the desire is to find out who murdered Charlie, right? The desire in all of that. The desire in all of that is truth and justice. So now, with that being said, I want to look at Doug Wilson's blog. And I know I've gone on for a little bit now, but I think all of that's necessary. And I'll go through this fairly quickly. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. You can go on Blog and Mablog is his. You can go on his website. You can go to YouTube and listen to it. I would actually recommend it. Go to it, listen to it. Don't take my word for it. I mean, I'm reading from it. I'm quoting from it directly, but go and listen to it. It was entitled Israel, Me, Team Candace, and the Turning Point Aftermath. And it's Blog and Mablog. So I'm just going to read snippets from it because, like I said, I don't have time to read the whole thing. At the end of the first paragraph, because he just got back, he spoke at AmFest 2025, Turning Point, and he's responding to that. He wants to clear up some things. He says, all in all, it was quite a spectacle. I consider myself personally enriched for having been there. And I guess he was paid to be there, right? He was a speaker, felt honored for that. So I guess he's not going to give a critique of the event. However, I would say that the critiques of the event are not completely unfounded, right? When Erica Kirk comes out in her glittery pantsuit to pyrotechnics and is playing the part of super mega boss bitch. And it's like, are you ready to mourn? Yeah. It's just over the top. And you have the selfie murder tent and all of the stuff. It's a little crazy. So I would say, that was Wilson's impression of it. That's fantastic. Well and good. That's you can't argue. That was his impression of it. It is what it is. I would say, looking at it from the outside, my take was maybe a little different than that. I would be a lot more suspicious and of of some of these things, and I would be more. Oh man, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I don't know. Some of it is highly questionable at best. We'll just go there. And he said, because he gave a talk. I think he gave a talk there. He did a Q&A with Steve Dace. And he said there was some pretty gaudy reactions online afterwards, meaning it was all thrust and no vector. So basically, anybody that critiqued him online based on the things he said at Turning Point USA. So if you heard him and you were like, you know what, I don't agree with that, he would say, it's your disagreement with me is all thrust and no vector, right? That's just. It's completely dismissive of anybody that could ever possibly disagree with him in any regard. And then he said there were those who called him a Zionist pig and were guilty of who made off in the night with my Judas shekels. I mean, honestly, he did get paid. So there's that. Okay, so then he begins with his opening remarks, and he says, the biblical expositor John Stott once observed that fuzzy thinking was one of the sins of our age. When you connect this to ignorance, malice, and bad faith, you can find yourself with something that is truly rancid, right? Something that is truly rancid, to which we would respond, amen, and that is a door that swings both ways. Ignorance, malice, and bad faith. That's a door that swings both ways, right? What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. And then moving on, he begins like his opening remarks. He's basically responding to the things the case that he made at the conference, primarily regarding the Jews, anti-Semitism, Israel, all this stuff. And he says, and I'm leaving out chunks here just so you know. Again, if you want to look at it, you can go to his blog. He said Christian Zionists and Christian supersessionists do have pronounced theological differences, but one thing they can agree on is that Jew hate is a serious sin, to which we would say, yes, obviously it is. Singling out any particular ethnic group and hating them just by virtue of them being in that group, yeah, that's wrong. And hatred of anybody is wrong. However, we would also say overreaction to that thing to push public policy is just as wrong. When you take something that is very small and very isolated and blow it up and make it a huge thing to then make it to shape public policy, that is also wrong. That is sin because it's deceitful and it's manipulative. You say, well, give me a reaction of that. Well, okay, how about affirmative action? How about BLM? How about DEI? All of these things where you take this one thing and you blow it up. Everybody's a racist. Everybody's a racist because everybody's a racist. We need to do this, that, and the other. So yeah, Jew hate is a serious sin. Okay. What's the bigger problem in our country, right? What's the bigger problem in our country? Is it Jew hate or is it Israel worship? You ask yourself that. What is the bigger problem, right? Because I go down the streets and I don't hear all of this hubbub about how we're supposed to hate the Jews. I don't see no Jews served here signs. I don't see the Jew drinking fountains. I don't see Jews excluded from the marketplace because they're Jews or from any institution because they're Jews. I don't see that. But what I do see, and it's not to say that that Jew hate doesn't exist. I'm just saying I don't see it. I've never seen it, to be entirely honest with you. I'm sure it's there, but I have never seen it. What I do see all of the time, and what I do think is a much bigger threat to our country is all the Israel sycophants who love and worship Israel. This is like all throughout the church. It's gross. It's disgusting. It's a violation of the first commandment. And it's just flippin' weird. And that stuff, that type of problem is the type of problem that shapes public policy that affects me, my neighbor, and my church and my children, right? But Pete down the road that hates the Jews, that doesn't have anything to do with me, and it doesn't shape public policy. He worship does. That's a much bigger problem that affects a lot more Americans. And he has decided to focus on one instead of the other. And not only did he not bring up the other, he focused so heavily on Jew hate as if the other doesn't exist at all, which is a problem and is leading intentionally so. And I'll go on to talk about neutrality, to which we would say, yeah, that also is a door that swings both ways. And then he goes on, and this is rich. He said what do I mean by high performance people? Because he said the Jews are a high performance people. The Jews are a talented and hardworking people. And I'm sure Jews everywhere said, thanks, Doug. We needed that from you. We really, really did. I mean, this is gross. It's pandering to the extreme. It's embarrassing. So just take Jews out. Them blacks, they're a talented and hardworking people. Those China folk, they're a talented and hardworking people. Them Mexicans, they are talented and hardworking, right? It's pandering to the extreme. And why would you do it? Why are you pandering to that particular group? Right? Definitely not a Zionist pig, but maybe a pandering jackass. Okay, and then moving on, he says, last thing, and you may consider this a little bonus round item. I mention it only because I believe it was brought up in the conference. This was brought up in the conference earlier. This bonus topic is the USS Liberty attacked by Israeli planes in 1967, killing 34 Americans. I am making no assertions here. All I am doing is noticing. All I am doing is asking questions, like Candace does, recklessly connecting dots. The Liberty was an intelligence gathering ship and LBJ was president. Israel was in the middle of a hot 1967 war. How confident are you personally that there was no American deep state in 67? How confident are you that we weren't playing both sides and feeding intel to Egypt? How confident are you that Americans can only be double-crossed and can never be the double-crosser? Your confidence in the essential goodness of the CIA is endearing. To which we would say, yeah, amen. Like, I don't think anybody, like, he's doing that to try to absolve only Israel of guilt by incriminating our own CIA, to which I would say, yeah, amen, they're all guilty. Shame on all of them. We want them all brought to justice. I don't trust any of them, right? It didn't help your cause. It actually, what you did was just confessed the guilt of Israel and said, yeah, but we're guilty too, so it's okay. No, it all sucks. All of it. And okay, yeah, I agree. That's a good point. It actually, I don't think it helps what he was trying to do, but he feels very strongly about it. Right? Yeah, we're guilty too. Absolutely 100%. And we just went over that, why there's no trust in the intelligence agencies. And then he goes on and he says, debates about whether the organizers of this conference were complicit. Okay, so I got to go up a little bit. He said, I want to close by saying that I believe that debates about foreign policy and America's relationship with Israel, or what happened to the USS Liberty, or anything like that, all of those questions, they're totally in bounds. Those questions, they have Doug's permission. You can ask those questions. But he's going to put some parameters around your mind here to let you know that there's other questions, they're not acceptable. Debates about whether the organizers of this conference were complicit in the murder of Charlie are in another category entirely. Oh, why is that? Why is that? They're in another category, best described as demented or unhinged. So if you have any questions regarding anybody at TPUSA regarding like any suspicious behavior or any potential financial motive, if you have any suspicions or would ask any questions regarding that, not that you would say they are guilty or accuse them of anything, but just that you would ask questions, reasonable questions, you are demented and unhinged. Okay, on what grounds, Doug? Just by asking those questions, what makes me that? Why is someone that would ask those questions, and the whole category of people that would ask those questions, they are demented and unhinged as a human, right? What puts them in those categories? Just to ask the questions. If passive-aggressive gaslighting insolence had a basketball team, it is long since time to retire Candace's jersey. Those assertions are not in the same universe at all, and so the latter must never be allowed to hide under the former. Why are those questions completely out of bounds when you have shady, deceptive behavior and you have financial incentives and motives? Why are you not allowed to ask those questions? Why is that an entirely different category of question? Like, honestly, just apply this to him and to his church. Like, I don't think he knows the people at TPUSA, right? Like, it's not like he has a close relationship with these people. I wouldn't imagine so. Not like he's hanging out with Erica Kirk on the weekends or any of those people. Right. But I would imagine he does have a very close relationship with the people that he actually ministers with, like his elders. Now, let's say one of his elders' best friends was murdered. Right. So you have law enforcement asking questions of the elder, and you have people asking questions of the elder, like, because the elder was listed as the beneficiary of the life insurance policy, right? You go, oh, okay, yeah, that's the thing. There would be honest questions. Okay, so you would ask all of the questions, and he would obviously be absolved of any guilt because he didn't do anything wrong, and you would cooperate, and everyone would cooperate, and all of these things. Doug wouldn't go to law enforcement and say, this is completely out of bounds. You have no business asking any of these questions at all. Matter of fact, law enforcement, you are demented and unhinged to even approach my fellow elder to ask them a question. Right? You wouldn't do that. Nobody would do that. Okay, so he goes on, various excommunications. Megan, Candace, and Tucker, there's dust up, and there's a good deal of confrontation type thing at the conference. It is entirely fair to say that there was a good deal of epistemic hostility between various speakers who appeared on stage and who spoke at the conference. Yeah. Right. And who made the decision to have all of those speakers there? It's just an interesting thing to point out. And then he goes on to say this, and this is where it starts getting really good, and why, like, we are just in a different category of thing now with this. And we are moving into an area that I think is gross and potentially very, 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 very bad. And I think what Doug does here and then continues to do, and we'll get into, is actually very disgusting and very destructive and very abusive. And if we're moving in that direction, it's really bad. It's not good. But he says, when Isaiah pronounced a judgment upon the land of Egypt, civil war is the instrument in the Lord's hand. And then and he says this from Isaiah 19:2. He says, I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they will fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. And then later he goes on and he quotes Isaiah 19:14. He said, the Lord hath mingled a perverse spirit in the midst thereof, and they have caused Egypt to err in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit. So, and then he says, notice that the phrase "I will set." He says, civil strife, civil war is the finger of God. It is his judgment. One of his instruments in bringing this about is the perverse spirit that he pours into the bowl in order to stir it up. Later, he calls Candace the perverse spirit that God pours out to create this civil strife. As a pastor, as an ambassador of Christ, he has publicly said, that's Candace. Now, you judge whether or not that is way out of bounds and whether or not he's justified in doing that, whether or not he has receipts to say that. That's a whole different category of thing. Not to mention the fact that I just spent a good chunk of time, I think most people would agree with me if they reflect on the past year, that there was a massive amount of civil strife in the conservative movement long before anyone heard anything that Candace Owens was saying. I can personally attest to that. And then he goes on and he quotes, for those who were questioning the example that he used and misunderstood his example regarding the USS Liberty, he quotes Psalm 56:5. All day long they twist my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. He quotes that and applies that to himself regarding people that misunderstand him, which just again might be a bit of a stretch. So then moving on down his blog here. He says, so in my dot-connected hypothesis, the issue was not whether the sailors on the Liberty were wronged by Israel. Of course they were. The issue is whether they were wronged by Israel and also by America, whether they were also betrayed by their own president, their own government. So with that said, the hypothesis I set out might be true and it might not be true. I don't know. But remember, I was just asking questions. No harm in asking questions, right? And I would say, good job. Now do Charlie. The message, and then he goes on, okay, this is his words. He said, the message here to everyone is to stop pretending that asking questions is some kind of neutral thing. It is not, and the pretense is wearing thin. Oh, okay, Dad. You going to give us a talking to? Because you think the pretense is wearing thin. Is it wearing thin for you as well? Is it wearing thin for everyone that would disagree with you as well? Are the questions that you ask completely out of bounds? Are you sick and demented when you ask questions or when we disagree with you on the official FBI narrative? And then he goes on, which two things are not like the one another? And he goes on to say, is Israel our greatest ally? Let us debate the question, right? Still on Israel. Let us knock ourselves out. Nobody is an anti-Semite for thinking that some other country is our greatest ally. I don't. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. There's this hyper weird connection that he wants to make to discrediting Candace and then bolstering up Israel. I don't know. It's just really, really weird. I'm sure he has his reasons for it, right? Like I said earlier, there were all of the things with Israel and TPUSA and all of the people that immediately went out after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. All of the high-profile Jewish people in our own country, and then the Israeli prime minister coming forward and going to podcasts saying, yeah, we didn't have anything to do with it. We love Charlie. And he loved us too. We promise. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not weird, but all right. And then continuing on, Wilson says, but there is another question, another kind of question, right? There's another kind of question that does not belong at a conference like this at all, right? The one that he just spoke at. That is the question of whether or not the organizers of the conference you are going to were complicit in the grotesque murder of their founder and friend. This is an allegation that is gobsmackingly off the leash, with the holder of that leash being off her meds. Obviously, he's referring to Candace, but it's not just Candace. Anybody that would think anybody. So if you believe in any way, shape, or form that anybody at TPUSA could have been involved or complicit in the murder of Charlie Kirk, that is completely outside of the bounds, regardless of whatever evidence you may have or suspicious behavior that they might have evidenced, you are gobsmackingly off your leash. Okay, why? Why, Doug? Why is somebody completely off their leash for thinking that they could have had something to do with it? I'm not saying they did. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just simply saying, why is asking that question completely out of bounds? I mean, just for, I think like 14% of murders that happen are generally by the people closest to them. So percentage-wise, it's not completely out of bounds. And if their behavior is completely suspect, that's not completely out of bounds. And if they have financial motive for doing so, it's a reasonable question. It doesn't make you demented. It doesn't make you gobsmackingly out of bounds. It doesn't make you mentally deranged and off your meds. That is a complete overreaction. And I would say, why such a gross overreaction? Why the desperate and unbecoming need to damn somebody? It's really messed up. Going and like what I said earlier, this is, I mean, we've always had cancel culture. We've always had all this crap that we're dealing with. Nobody likes it. It's all messed up. But we haven't had it to the degree to where it is baptized in Christian language, and we're having witch hunts and scarlet letters and all of this stuff. It's just, this is so gross to me. It's just passive aggressive, gross. Okay, so then he's talking about, I don't really know what he's talking about here, so okay, I'll read it anyway. He says, if someone thinks that this is a reasonable question and he gets an invitation to speak at TPUSA for some reason, and he accepts the invitation, it really means that he doesn't believe it is a reasonable question at all and is just being a hypothetical opportunist going to the conference to chum around with the murderers. I don't really know what he's talking about there. I'm sure he has somebody in mind. I don't know who he's talking about there. Maybe Candace, but she wasn't there. So he has somebody else in mind. If you're more in the know, I guess you know. I don't know. And then he says, here is the great smudge. The great smudge is happening. Here's where the great smudge is happening. This is where the disingenuous juke move is being performed. A grotesque libel and slander is being hurled at the leadership of TPUSA. Well, how does he know it's a grotesque libel and slander? Where are his receipts? Right? Can he prove that this is grotesque libel and slander? What was the grotesque libel and slander? Tell me if you know. Share it. With preparations being made to be insulted and affronted if they decided not to invite you next time. If they don't invite you next time, it will be a plain indication that they don't want to face the music. So this hypothetically must be what this hypothetical person is saying. They are trying, and he says, they are trying to censor questions. No. Then he says, it would actually be a plain indication that free speech has performed one of its central functions, which is to identify who the morons are, and in this case, the impudent morons are. So, if those are questions or suspicions that you had, just so you know, Doug Wilson thinks you are an impotent moron. Now, I'm not that old, but I lived through COVID. I didn't get vaccinated. I didn't wear a mask. I got thrown out of a lot of places. Never shut down my church. I was repeatedly called names like this, right? Science denier. You're killing grandma. You hate people, right? All of those types of things. Disease spreader. and things like impudent moron. Why? Well, because I don't agree with you. Doug Wilson is saying that if you have any suspicions regarding TPUSA at all, you are an impudent moron. You wonder how he handles people in his church, right? That are like, you know what? This is kind of fishy. How does he handle that? If you're in his church and you hear this, he thinks that of you, right? I don't know how you get around that. When people tell you what they think, when people tell you who they are, you should probably listen. Okay, and then he says, Candace is not just asking questions. So this is where it gets really, really good. And I in large part, I'll just let these words speak for themselves. Candace is not just asking questions, right? And remember, it's not just her. She's representative. It's anybody that has their suspicions or questions long before Candace. She is making very serious allegations. She is an accuser. She is an accuser of persons. I watched the podcast that he did, or the vlog for the blog, and he was thumping on the desk when he was saying these things, talking about Candace Owens. I've never seen him so worked up about anybody, to be entirely honest. This is so disproportional and so weird. You wonder what the objectives and the motives are, what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. I don't have receipts. She is an accuser of persons. She is the perverse spirit that the Lord has poured into the bowls. That's a direct quote. That's based on the verse from Isaiah that we just read. She is the great bringer of what may be called invisio receipts. That's a lie. She has a vast army of followers, of people following her, who are demanding the dopamine rush they get whenever she feeds them the next crazy line. So I went through and I listened to her podcast because I wanted to see firsthand what she was saying. Does that make me, am I one of her followers longing for a dopamine rush? Right? That's part of the problem when you lump everybody into a category and then you have to systematically damn them in order to bolster something that is not true. And then he says she has a vast army of people following her. Okay, and then carrying on. He said that is why the moratorium that Erica and Candace agreed upon couldn't hold. It was like arranging a ceasefire with Hamas. So not only is she of the devil and a perverse spirit and the accuser, so she's like her father, the devil, she's also like Hamas. But it's not just her, it's everybody she represents, right? Candace has a ravenous bear for an audience. So if you listen to her, if you've ever been part of her audience, you're a ravenous bear. And she has to feed it tainted meat. So there's all these ravenous people that are clamoring at her to listen to her, and she has to continually feed them, with that meat getting increasingly tainted. This is why we are moving into territory formerly occupied by those people who needed to read the tabloid headlines about Madonna and Sasquatch having a child. And then he goes on and shares the gospel to Candace, to Team Candace. So again, like he's admitting this, it's not just Candace, it's anybody that listens to her. If you listen to Candace Owens and you agree with anything that she has said, Doug Wilson likens you to an adulterer and an idolater. And yeah, basically when he's sharing the gospel, he's saying all of these people need to repent, right? Like adulterers and idolaters, and coming to the point here, liars. So if Candace Owens, anybody that listens to Candace, you are a liar, you are a slanderer, and you must repent of your lies. Then he goes on, and he says, the tension within the conservative movement today are not the result of mere differences of opinion. They are the result of wicked and unsubstantiated allegations. Again, repeatedly, saying that he knows damn well Candace Owens is not single-handedly responsible for the division and within the conservative movement. To continually say that is it like, that is not true. That is not true. It's not true. There are a lot of divisions, and there are a lot of good reasons for those divisions. Saying promised receipts that are followed up with no receipts, lies that are covered up by being slathered in more lies. Where are they? Show that. Show them, right? Show how she has not brought receipts. Right? You are publicly accusing her of all of these things, saying she is of the devil in the name of God publicly. You should probably bring a receipt or two yourself. To do all of this in the name of God is unbecoming, right? It is remarkably and profoundly stupid and just leading and wrong. And then he says this. This is a morass, a slough of ungodliness. What we are looking at is a toxic combination of people who are poorly educated, who have been shut out of economic opportunity, and are bitterly resentful. So just to backtrack a little bit, Team Candace, you need to hear the gospel. You're steeped in sin. If you've ever been a part of her audience, you are poorly educated. You are bitterly resentful. That's who you are as a person, who do not understand the biblical standards of evidence and justice, which he obviously so clearly laid out in this blog, and who do not want to understand them. You don't want to understand them. And who have had their grasp of the concept of objective truth rotted out by postmodern tribalism, which obviously he hasn't. In other words, to use shorter names for all such results, we have ignorance, envy, and bitterness, injustice, and relativism. These are all things that call for repentance. So just so you know, if you agree with Candace on any point, or the just doing the enterprise of the investigation itself, or anything that she has said, or have listened to any of her stuff, you're part of her audience. You are poorly educated. You are bitterly resentful. You do not want to understand biblical justice or objective truth. You are ignorant. You are envious. You are bitter. You are propagating injustice and relativism, and you need to repent of your sin. He says, the world is full of sinners, but you can never get right with God by focusing on their sins. To which we would say, amen, just like you just did, Doug. Right? If you don't agree with the FBI's narrative and you've listened to Candace and think she has had some good points, or you just appreciate what she's doing, you are those things. Those are his words. He put them in writing. He went public and said, this is where I'm going to stake my flag. Okay, well and good. This is far worse to me than like Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables, because Hillary Clinton never went out and said, thus saith the Lord. You know, these people are all deplorables. They are of the devil and they need to repent. This is what I mean when I say that this type of speech is getting amped up. Unfortunately, I think it's going to continue, and unfortunately, I think it's really, really bad. When this is the case, he just damned her. And again, anybody that's listened to her or thinks she's had some good things to say or questions anything regarding TPUSA, damned them, maybe me, you, us, whatever, damned them as an ambassador of Christ. Now, how do you stay in his congregation at that point? How do you continue to listen to the guy at this point? And it is such a shame, right? There's so much good there. Why go scorched earth here, right? And I don't know. Why would you do this? Why would he do this? I don't know, and I don't care. He did. I'm thankful for all the good that he's done. I can chew the meat and I can spit out the bones, but I am done. I'm done with him, anybody in his orbit. Done. This is, when people tell you who they are, really, and how they really feel about you, you should listen. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know what would lead him to do and say all of those things. I have my suspicions, but none of those matter, right? He did. So I share that with you. That's all I got for you today. Have a good day. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media and all the places.